Thank you for taking out time to join us for our AgileThought Virtual Community event today. It's a pleasure to have you here. So building an agile mindset during COVID-19. So along with myself, facilitating today will be Andrea Floyd and Dan Newman. Always a pleasure to facilitate with them as co-facilitators. It's really great working with them. And just in case you're not sure who's who for some reason, here we are. So I am a principal transformation consultant. Andrea Floyd is a transformation consultant, and Dan Newman is a senior agile coach. I'm all here with AgileThought. Our AgileThought Virtual Community, our topic for today is building an agile mindset during COVID-19. So the way the conversation will flow today is we'll talk about, what is the agile mindset exactly? It's one of those things that we all hear as a buzzword, but we're going to talk about that a bit. And then, what did COVID-19 do? Like, it obviously threw a monkey wrench in some things with this mindset. So what are some of those things? And then we'll talk about thriving with uncertainty, creating new habits, and validating that you're on the right path through this. So this session is recorded by your continued participation. You are agreeing to be recorded. So we do record this for those who cannot make the session. And then we also use the recording for us to improve, because we like to practice what we preach and have continuous improvement ourselves as well. So with that said, we will jump right in.
Wonderful. So as Quincy said, I'm Andrea Floyd, and I'm delighted to be with you guys today. I'm going to start us off with trying to define what exactly is it that we mean by agile mindset. So basically, the agile mindset is established, as we know, with the 4 values of the Agile Manifesto, and then it's grounded in those 12 guiding principles. But it's really about the set of attitudes that support an agile working environment. And it's ultimately, hopefully, something that gets interwoven into the fabric of the company's culture. It's really the foundation that supports the people and understanding a shift to a new way of working, adopting business agility. And what I like to think about is there's a key difference between doing agile and being agile. And I think that starts with the agile mindset at the forefront of the way you think. But I guess my first question to you guys would be, are you experiencing today in your organization, if you're practicing agile, that it's more about just doing it and to check the box? Or are people opening up to new ideas and new ways of working and thinking about it from more of an agile mindset? What's your experience? So Michael's sharing that he would say it's mixed. There's a desire to be more agile, but kind of still stuck in the old ways of doing it. And I think that's actually what a lot of us may find in our companies that we're working with. There's this deep desire, but the struggle is, how do you move from here to there? And that's why shifting to a new way of thinking is sometimes the thing that follows the doing. It's a good point, Michael. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when you think about the agile mindset, I sort of cluster together some of the things that you might hope to see as you start to see people demonstrating an agile way of thinking and adopting that mindset. And some of those are around how people are facing the uncertainty. And we all know that there's a heck of a lot of uncertainty out there today. COVID-19 is just one of those things that we're facing, and it's really impacted the way we're working and how we approach work. But other ideas or other concepts that are usually considered and associated with an agile mindset are around thinking about how do you learn, that creating a culture where learning thrives and you have this ability to adapt quickly and inspect what's going on, but then be able to pivot. So that freedom of thought that it's okay, we're going to learn as we go. We're going to find new information that's going to shift how we approach a problem or an opportunity. And so that ability to make that mindset where you shift and you are okay and comfortable with pivoting becomes fundamental as in terms of looking at holistic challenges that may be facing you as an organization or as an individual. Another item that can be associated is deferring commitment. That means you make it just enough of a commitment to something so that it allows you to learn as you go. And then once you have enough information, you can actually make a commitment to moving forward. So it's okay to learn incrementally. And that sort of dovetails into incremental delivery of value. We do that as part of the Agile frameworks because it allows us to learn, inspect, adapt, insert feedback loops. So we're always thinking about what are we hearing and how will that impact how we move forward. Do you guys have any unique ways that you guys have implemented a culture of learning within your organizations?
Yes, can I speak here?
Please.
Okay, hey, this is Mahendra. So yes, definitely, I won't talk about the organization, but basically in my team, where the challenge is to cope up with the technology, the new technology we were trying to introduce. And number two is the way the new processes were introduced in terms of adopting Agile. The way the motivation was driven is by putting a quiz and contest at the end of it, and as a result, whoever wins it or whoever performs over consistently over the period of four weeks or 4 sprint. I think I don't remember exactly it was 4 sprint or 4 weeks. He or she would get rewarded there, and the more reward is not in terms of cash or any box of chocolate, but it's recognition within the team that okay, he is a champion. That did motivate team to learn and adapt to the new way of working. And that's how the culture of learning was brought in. And they all started enjoying because there is a consistent appreciation, consistent feedback was given to them. And the value of learning and contributing was definitely amplified through messages. And that helped actually.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing which I wanted to understand, because the third bullet point, deferring commitment, that is something immediately resonates with the discussion very often crops up on various social media, particularly about minimum viable product and all that. How the deferring commitment keeps, that's a question to the audience here or whoever can answer, how the deferring commitment can keep team focused on the final commitment they make to business. Is there any thoughts on that?
That's a great question. I'll go ahead and share my thoughts and then pass the ball to somebody else to add on. I think your example of a minimum viable product is an excellent example. Again, what I hear you saying and sharing that is that we understand where we think we want to go, but we don't quite have full clarity. So we want to focus on delivering some piece of value that gets us going in the right direction, that is leading us to our fuller solution or capabilities, but it's meaningful in itself. So there's value in this initial minimal viable product. So it's the expectation that we're going to learn as we go. Maybe we're proving out architecture or technology as we move forward on delivering just a slice, that MVP. And I think that's a great example of creating a culture of learning, allowing you to prove or disprove some of your assumptions, but you're still delivering value. So it's not like, ideally, you may have some learnings that say, you know what, that assumption was wrong. I'd rather hear that now. So it's not like a total failure. That learning in itself is a cost saving. So I think that there's creativity in coming up with what's meaningful in an MVP that helps you learn as you go, and you keep in mind that you're looking to try to keep whatever's delivered as much as possible and not have it seen as throwaway.
And on that thought, we've got a slide a little bit later on deferring commitment, but I do view an MVP
as a form of deferring commitment, because if you're going to spend $2 million on the big thing, maybe you don't commit that full 2 million, but you spend 100,000 to put something truly minimal together to see if it makes sense to invest yet another chunk, et cetera, versus saying, we're in for the full 2 million. Boy, I hope somebody wants this thing when we're done with it. And then Michael has a comment. He was trying to think of anything unique they've done to increase learning. While they really do push learning, he's not sure it's unique. He says, training department, third-party resources, internal leadership programs, and communities of practice are some of the ways they've fostered continuous learning at their organization.
And I love that when you see community practices put into place, it's lovely to see people learning from one another, and it's actually set in context that's meaningful to them. So I've seen those being incredibly effective in terms of creating opportunities for conversations so that people learn together. Okay.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. So now there are so many things that can be tethered to an Agile mindset, but on this side, I'm sort of focusing on the people. And this is about connecting people and creating an environment of safety, sort of to echo on to what was just shared. In order for people to feel able to fail and be see that not as a detriment, but as a learning opportunity, we have to create this environment of safety. And that is achieved by really keeping in your mindset the importance and the value of the people. Without our people, we don't deliver. And so it's essential that we create an environment that acknowledges and demonstrates that we value people, and we create this opportunity for them to be safe so they can innovate. And again, in the Agile mindset today, as we face some of the disruptors that we're looking at, the artistry of coming up with creative ways to collaborate are essential. And we know that now that most of us are working in a remote way, collaboration takes more and more creativity. And that, again, how do you build that connection with one another? And at the front of everything is creating an environment where voices are able to be shared and heard, and we welcome the diversity of thought and valuing everybody's voice, and there's something to be shared. So as I think about problems that we're facing, I try to think about it from an Agile mindset around how do I honor the people and give them the safety so that they can share, we can learn together, and we can grow and learn. Have you guys found any creative ways of coming up with, in remote sessions, how do you get that space for people to be heard? Okay, I think we're going to get some more tips as we continue through the presentation. So I'm going to hand this off now to Quincy.
All right. So in comes the monkey wrench called COVID-19. All right. So, you know, it kind of reminds me of those old commercials, those old Calgon commercials where, you know, like all this math stuff is going on, you know, around, and the person's trying to maintain, you know, some level of normacy, you know, in their life and get some peace and so forth. And I feel like that's part of what has happened in some instances with the Agile mindset and what's going on with COVID-19 at the time. So there are some specific areas that I've heard either, you know, from clients or meetups, virtual meetups, or just stuff I've seen on LinkedIn, or that I've experienced personally, you know, where COVID-19 has caused some challenges, you know, in terms of our interpretation of the Agile Manifesto, our interpretation of some of the principles, our interpretation of, or exercising some of the Scrum values. And so individuals and interactions over processes and tools, all right? So that's part of the Agile Manifesto, and that's part of, you know, what goes into that mindset. and it's still true, but I believe it was challenged, and it has been challenged a bit because we couldn't even do what we're doing now if we didn't place enough emphasis on the processes and tools. And so since 9.9 out of 10 teams are distributed now and remote and virtual, we're having to, in some instances, almost make processes and tools as important as individuals and interactions. And so I'm curious, what has been your experience with that?
Yeah, Quincy, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was trying to catch up with my audio stuff, but like the last question is like, what have we done to increase engagement? We have different tools that we're using now. We're using Miro, we're using Poll Everywhere, we're using Retrian, we're using, in some tools that we've had subscriptions to for a long time that never really got any adoption. Now all of a sudden I've got people knocking down my door being like, hey, how do we get on that Miro thing? To the point where at one point my boss actually came to me and he's like, can we stop introducing new tools? Because we're having to spend time in every meeting learning a new tool. Like we went a little too far in the opposite direction. So yeah, absolutely fatigue, 100%. That you went from each the tool of the week.
Yeah, and it also, creates other, man, I was working with this team and I was working with that team, and like, where did I put that stuff? Because I used a trial version over here and that expired. And then I used a trial version over there and that expired. And so, yeah, I, definitely felt like that, has been challenged. And I do think many of us, have risen to the challenge, but I think it's one of those things that definitely challenge, well, how are we really interpreting, this part of Agile Manifesto? Did it change, or did we have to further adapt, to maintain that mindset?
Yeah. So Quincy,
Yes.
Before we go ahead, what I've seen here is definitely individuals over the interaction, but due to COVID, it's again the human behavior. When you don't see people, you want to make sure they are working toward delivery. As a result of that, the interactions and the intervention and interruption, I would use the word third one, has increased because then everybody wants to know what others are doing, and number of calls have gone up. And as a result, people have to find the time to work to keep their commitment as well. So the working hours have gone up. So definitely the interaction, individual over interaction, that particular principle has got challenged there. And then eventually what I have seen being practiced is to make sure we control the number of meetings we hold in a day or in a week. Otherwise, continuous ping on the Teams or Slack also disturbs and hampers the productivity there as well.
Yeah, and those are all excellent points, and thank you for that contribution. I noticed also in the chat a reference about Zoom fatigue, which is obviously a little ironic for us at this moment. But,
yeah.
All right, sure. So, I was looking through the principles, and one of the Agile principles, there were a couple, but one that stood out to me was build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. And I think this has gotten challenged, as well, in various ways. And so how people are supported now warrants something a bit different than before. So if you take this picture, for example, well, how, this person needs to be supported, they needed a different type of desk than what they may have had before, maybe a more traditional desk where you sit down with a chair and so forth. And so, I know I've heard many people at different, companies say, hey, can I get approval for a stand-up desk? Can I get approval for a ball chair, or because of sitting for so long? So these things have been challenged in order to maintain some of that agile mindset and stay within these principles, or not so much stay within the principles in terms of like a restriction, but really to act out these principles. So what have you seen around this?
So I think one of the things that comes to mind for me when you ask us to kind of reflect on this particular principle is when we have the trust to get the job done. When the pandemic started, everything was in crisis mode. Everything was on fire. And how do we deal with going remote? How do we deal with, like in our case, offering the payment protection plan loans when we didn't even have the facilities to do so when the pandemic started? We didn't offer those kind of loans. We got it done within like a week. We made it happen.
Awesome.
And we talk about that kind of stuff, and it seems as though there's always a sense of amazement from the business end when we talk about kind of getting past some of the mindset of the way things are always done and be like, wow, we got this done really quickly. And where I've been standing is, if we kept that focus all the time, we would really get stuff done. It doesn't have to be on fire. And I think that's where, like, I look at this, and there was that moment where everything was kind of taken back, and it was just like, we need to make decisions. We need to tell people where to go. We need to tell them what to do because we're in crisis mode. But now how do we let it ease back into that, but keep that focus on there? And that's kind of one of the challenges where I'm sitting with Grow, is to say, like, let's keep that spirit of focus, but it doesn't have to be everything's on fire.
Yeah, and I think that you make an excellent point, Michael. And I don't think you're alone. I think there are plenty of others out there that are looking at the pandemic scenario and situation and saying, well, we've been in this now for several months. And so we've made some adjustments and some things that yes, we didn't necessarily expect to arrive at this point this way, but we have. And so what are the things that we can further and take with us going forward that are really beneficial? Because there have been some silver linings, to this for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
so then,
in our case, it's we've played out the business case that we've assumed for years, is that we could be a lot more distributed than we thought we were, and it's kind of moved up some of our plans where we're like, do we even need a headquarters anymore? I mean, it's not happening anytime soon, but it's the question's being asked, because we're still, we've got, I mean, several of you have seen our building before. There's about 100 people that are going in right now. Everybody else is distributed. We had all this space that's not being used. I went in last Friday and there were 7 people on my entire floor.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really good that you all are able to exercise social distancing with no issue whatsoever, apparently, because there's only 7 people in there on that floor. So that's really good. All right. So, I mentioned that there were some other principles that I thought have been challenged during this time in terms of our interpretation. And the principle of the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. So, this is one that stood out to me significantly, because for years, I would have this conversation periodically, whether, via LinkedIn or just meetups, of what face-to-face conversation meant. And I was of the notion that you did not have to be in person to have face-to-face conversation, because we have video. Now, would you prefer to be in person? Maybe, I mean, obviously you can get more than nonverbal, but you can get pretty good nonverbal communication via video. And then the other aspect of that is, just like anything else, the more we do this, the more we start forming new habits, and we start noticing new characteristics and new traits and things that help us to communicate better, via video. So I found, people saying, well, how are we going to have face-to-face communication, a conversation, and we can't come into the office? Okay, well, I think many of us are doing it. But what are your thoughts around that? Did you find that this was a challenge for people in terms of their interpretation of face-to-face conversation?
It does provide a challenge, particularly if the team is working in the different time zones. If they are in the one time zone, then their clocks are aligned, and they can be reached confidently within the working hours. But when they are in a different time zone, like my team is working in India, and half of them are in UK, half of them are in India. Now we have aligned our clocks, but that's okay. But if you have to reach out of the team member for some help, then that needs to be managed. Otherwise, we can easily forget the time difference, and that is where the challenge would come. Saying, do we get the information on time? And that is something we almost hit that almost every week. But that is definitely an effective method of having a video call combined with the whiteboard. So that helps.
Nice perspective. Was someone else trying to chime in?
Yes, this is Amy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I think the team has transitioned extremely well, but I feel like there's an intangible loss. It's hard to quantify. It's impossible to quantify. And I personally feel like I'm doing my job a little bit with one arm tied behind my back, because there's this extra collaboration that you get when you are face to face, just a little extra. And I can't, we've certainly managed, but I wonder how much, I don't know how to even quantify it. And we're all, so.
No, I think that brings up an excellent point, Amy, and it actually even sparked an idea for me about, how do you quantify some of these things that are either gain or loss that are hard to, in some instances, even articulate, but it's there, So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And MC, I think you had your hand up.
Hey, Quincy.
Hey.
I had a slightly different twist on it, but I think I can speak to it a little bit as well. So the teams that I had worked with were always distributed, right? Which we tend to do, but we had set up a lot of practices that helped, things like, strongly encouraging video usage on our, for our events and things like that. I think that the challenge for us became for the folks that were onshore, right? There was a core group, product owner, solution architect, dev leads. Those folks were with me. And that's where the challenge, kind of arose, because we would, outside of those events, we would get together and talk and have those face-to-face type meetings. So we tried to improvise and did a lot more spontaneous chats and things like that. And even on the chats, I was very purposeful in throwing up my web camera, during those to try to simulate that we were together and they could see my facial expressions and we could try to have some of those, and I've heard of people doing things like, office hours, where, you set aside dedicated time and people can kind of float in as they want to interact with you. So I think I totally get it. But we just have to work a little harder to get as close as we can to the old school, face to face.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, MC. Absolutely. And that is, when I think about, how we use technology and so forth, I mean, that's a large part of the point is, to get as close as possible to bridge that gap from what we would like to do versus what we are limited, to doing at that time. So a couple of other things I'll just mention. We may not go into full detail on all of these, but these are other interpretations that I felt have been challenged. So transparency, and this is, specific, to Scrum, where, I've heard, people say, well, how's the team going to be transparent and we can't see what they're doing? How's the team going to be transparent and, I can't check in on them like I normally would. I can't just do my walk bys and see if they're really, doing work or not. So in some ways I feel like it's been challenged. In other ways, I feel like it has actually helped it a little bit because similar to what was mentioned earlier, you have to kind of go out your way more now to be transparent. So I, see some benefit there as well. And then when we look at the Scrum values specific to focus and openness, some find it challenging to focus these days because I guess for various reasons, they find it more difficult to focus. And then the same with the openness. So we'll take maybe one or two comments and then, quickly move on. So what would be one comment that anyone would make about this?
I mean, the one thing that comes instantly to mind, and we've talked in some of your sessions before, when we talk about smells, like if I had another leader and do have another leader, have said like, well, how do I know what they're doing? Like, how did you know before? And don't you trust your people?
Yeah.
And is their work getting done? So.
Yeah, excellent point. I think it also, I guess, kind of challenge, are you really supporting, this way for your folks to work, So we're going to continue to move forward since we're so close on the time. And I'm going to hand it off to Dan.
Yeah, well, I am trying to figure out if we actually need an agile mindset, because I think what I see on the news is, hey, we've got a vaccine. It's almost done. Might work. It might work. And then if we do get it, it's going to be rolled out to everybody in the next, 6 months, year, 2 years. Anyway, so I'm not sure we actually need an agile mindset. So we'll explore it. We'll go on to the next slide. Even if we get COVID licked, we see other things in the news about uncertainty. A historic number of storms in the Atlantic. We've got India and China that are lining up over some disputed land. And, each country has roughly 1 billion people, so I don't see how that could go wrong. You've got, in the United States, we have the student loan crisis that who knows how that'll work out, because we had the financial crisis from the housing industry. And then if that's not bad enough, you've got rocks hurtling towards the earth around election day. And if that doesn't get us, something like 1 in 5 adults apparently believe aliens are going to invade. So uncertainty doesn't seem like it's necessarily going to go away on us. In reality, what's going to get us will probably be none of these things. It'll be the thing we didn't think about, because back in October of 2019, there wasn't a COVID, and look where we are now. So who knows what the uncertainty will be, but there's going to be something. Let's go on to the next one. So within this uncertainty, though, there are a lot of opportunities that are created. You see startups like Second Kitchen that are pairing bars that don't have food with restaurants that don't have bars and creating that symbiotic relationship. Up here in Indiana, we have a restaurant that now has takeout liquor packages. You can buy like all the drinks you need, all the drink fixings you need to go home and be your own bartender. So that's pretty sweet. You've got a historian in Chicago who used to give live in-person tours, and now he's made quite a name for himself streaming those and going around to cemeteries and talking about all the rich history of Chicago. And just as was being referred to with Grow Financial in responding to the payment protection program. ViStar Credit Union, similarly, trying to get the government funds into the hands of businesses who really would benefit from the payment protection program. Again, spun up an entire way of delivering that process that they hadn't even had on their radar, before, because there wasn't a program to use to distribute funds. So I think there's a lot of value in looking for ways to find the opportunity in some of these challenges. Wanted to leave you with kind of 4 things. We'll explore them here together. So one thing organizations can do is try to make small bets. When you bet big things, Mahendra, you were mentioning, hey, MVP and kind of that sense of deferring commitment. MVPs are ways of making little bets. They're easier to make. It's much easier to commit X amount of dollars than 10X or 100X of dollars to trying to figure something out. And when you're able to make appropriately sized small bets, you avoid that risk of a catastrophic loss. If you can sustain the loss, then you aren't exposing yourself to nearly as much risk. And then if you get feedback from the market, if you get feedback from your family, if it's a home-based situation where you're trying something out, you can then, if you get positive feedback, you can then amplify that. And if that feedback is negative, then you can dampen that result. So I'm a little bit curious, either in chat or a quick comment. Has anybody have something that comes to mind for something that would be a small bet?
I think what I wanted to add, Dan, what you just said, if I may, is that, see, if you look at the cycle of getting team into Agile mindset, how do we start getting them coach, get into the room, do the gaming, and get them to understand what is that Agile means and what is DevOps means as a next level of work, and how do we get transition to DevSecOps from Agile, DevOps, and DevSecOps part of it. What is that the problem I'm currently looking at, and that relates to the question you asked on the slide, that how do we get new set of people transition or transform into working in Agile mindset or Agile program or Agile project or Agile way of working, whatever you want to call it, because everyone is referring this as it. And that is a challenge currently I'm contemplating on. Like, how do I get that person to think and get ready to pick up his first project and start working in the first sprint? And that is something probably new challenge in terms of adopting Agile with the new team member. Existing team member, yes, there were some teething issues which we overcame, and now we are settled. But what about new team member? If you don't get anyone to, I always use the word infect in a positive way. But how do I infect an Agile culture into the new? Yeah. Into the new
I'm not sure we should use infect right now, but let's and keep an eye on the clock. I'll give you a quick response to that so that we're able to touch on the couple other things here. I think it really is a lot about. We hear herd immunity with COVID, and I think the herd is really important for bringing new people up to speed too. Yeah. Where this is the way we do things here, and bringing them up alongside you, as opposed to trying to do it as a one-off. So I think that's part of it. But I'm going to ask Quincy to go ahead and click here since he's my controller. Another way to really look at things and adopt an agile mindset is to look for two-way doors. So these are doors that you can walk through, and if what you find on the other side isn't to what you like, then you can walk back out. Differentiating that from a one-way door where, boy, once you're through that door and it closes behind you, you're stuck where you find yourself. And so as you're looking at situations that present themselves to you, look for those two-way doors because they require less analysis. One of the reasons Waterfall ended up with this analysis paralysis is because we were going to decide if we were going down that path, and once we were on that path, there's no going back, and we ended up with sunk cost fallacy where we kept pouring money after bad projects. You ended up with the death marches because people had to deliver the thing, even if it was a bad idea. And so the alternative to that is looking for those two-way doors, related to small bets in a lot of ways. But what can we do? What can we go through, a decision we can make, and then if it doesn't work, we can come back. For Scrum teams, I think taking the stance of experimentation in retrospectives is an excellent way of taking the two-way door and making it reality. What I mean by that is, let's try something for this sprint. If it's a bad idea, or we get bad results, or just we don't like it, it's an experiment, we've learned, and then we can come up with a different hypothesis, a different experiment for the next one. So we've got small bets, two-way doors. The third one here is going to be about deferring commitment. So look for different ways, maybe it's a rent versus buy. If you're not sure you like the car, rent one. You don't have to buy one, as an example. A lot of companies are still bringing on additional people to do work. So maybe there's the opportunity to contract versus hire those people. I know with a lot of projects, and one of the Agile principles is maximizing the amount of work not done. And so for me, that looks like doing features that are minimalistic and achieve the goal, and then later coming back and possibly making them more feature rich. And then you can see the other items on here. My favorite one, those refundable reservations. As I book very limited travel plans, make sure there's a very generous refund policy, because I'm not going to commit to something that's going to get blown up. And all of these different approaches enhance your adaptability to changing situations. What will be the COVID state in a particular city on a particular date in the future? I have no idea. That's why things like refundable reservations are super valuable. And the last one, if we pretend things aren't uncertain, we're making a grave mistake. And so we should be talking about the uncertainty. One of the terms that's been making my skin crawl lately is committing to things, committing to backlog items in a sprint, committing to this, committing to that. They're terms that we coach away from because there is uncertainty. We're going to learn as we go through, and it's important both in your personal life and with your business colleagues to really communicate about that uncertainty. Here's our forecast. Here's where we think we're going. Here's where we expect to be with X amount of certainty or uncertainty. Maybe it's a 50-50 chance. Maybe we're 95% confidence. Maybe there's only 1 chance in 10 that we're actually going to do this. But we really need to make the assumptions and the expectations of probability known, because that feeds into the transparency that Quincy was talking about on one of the Scrum pillars. We need a lot of transparency. That's going to foster some of the trust that we aren't just making up the future that we may not be able to achieve. And so I would give you those 4 kind of strategies with small bets, two-way doors, communicating about the uncertainty, and pop quiz. What's the other one? Deferring commitment. That's what it was for adapting an agile mindset.
All right. So what are some things that you can consider, and thanks, Dan, to validate that you're on the right path, right? Because we are, obviously have been making adjustments, and, we want to maintain that agile mindset, going forward. So how can you know? So here are 4 things that you can ask yourself that hopefully will help. Am I leveraging today's technology to exercise the Agile Manifesto? All right. So there are, different forms of technology out there. Mural was mentioned earlier. There's Mural, there's whiteboards, there's all kinds of things out there. Am I using those things to help me to act upon the Agile Manifesto? Am I finding new ways to live the Agile principles given today's opportunities? And so, out of those 12 principles, what are we doing? What are you doing to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. As we said, while these are trying times, there's also some silver linings, there as well. Am I expecting and adapting frequently? And from what I'm hearing, many of you are, adapting on a regular basis. You're checking out what you're doing and doing your inspection and making adjustments. And those things are vitally important. And lastly, at a minimum, am I being adaptable and willing to learn? Because if we're not willing to learn and we're not willing to be adaptable, then it's going to be very difficult for us to maintain an agile mindset. By definition, the word agile has a lot to do with adaptability, and the ability to be flexible, and so forth. So these are just, 4 things that you can ask yourself to help you to validate if you're on the right path. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Andrea to wrap this up.
So I just want to say a big thank you to everybody for joining us today, and hopefully this opens up our way of thinking. So for myself, Quincy, and Dan, thank you so very much for being with us.